Hello everybody, welcome to the Roi de Berge. This is, we're in a boat, perched on top of the Queen Elizabeth Hall in London, and it's a steam, and it's a replica of Joseph Conrad's boat that he took up the river, up the Congo River. So the boat is filled with books. There's books all around, everywhere. This is a project of Artangel, and so every once in a while, I think every month, there's some musical event, and then a lot of other artists come and write and talk and do things. So what we're going to do is mostly focus on the river for the next little while, and I'm going to just sort of be a kind of river DJ and talk about a few things that have been on my mind. Books and boats, for one. And then some things about... when I first heard about this project, I had wanted to make it about codes. And so I had a plan to talk about a book that I really loved, and that's this book here, which is called Between Silk and Cyanide. And this is by a guy named Leo Marx, and he was a code breaker in World War II, and also he also did the screenplay for Peeping Tom. And so Leo Marx was a great writer. So here's the beginning of the book. He was drafted in 1942. In January 1942, I was escorted to the war by my parents in case I couldn't find it or met with an accident on the way. He goes on to say that he was selected to be part of the code-breaking team, and also, so here's the scene as his parents see him off. My parents accompanied their only joint venture to the door of the train, and for the first time in 20 years prepared to relinquish him. Mother's farewell to her only child was the public's first glimpse of open-heart surgery. Latecomers were offered a second. As I entered the carriage, clutching my chicken and bowler hat, she called out at the top of her voice, if it had one, "Look after my boy." So anyway, I love that. Look after my, the top of her voice, if the top of her voice had one. Anyway. So what Leo Marx did was revolutionize codes and code making in World War II, and he at that time codes were all more or less written on the basis of poems. So they were the guy who was writing the code had to memorize a poem and then quickly devise his message. Now, a lot of the code, a lot of the poems that were chosen were so obvious that they were easily cracked. So the Nazis just kind of went, "Charge of the Light Brigade again, really?" So they would just crack them in a second. So Leo Marx decided he was going to write his own poems for the agents to use in their messages. So anyway, that worked pretty well. Now, writing code under those circumstances was really, really difficult. And so agents had a very short life, as did the radio transmitters of the code, because they were the ones who had to they were sitting there hunched in the cold latrine with their radios, and the Nazis kind of swinging around, zeroing in on them. They had a lifespan of about 6 weeks, really. So anyway, Leo Marx had a kind of a revelation in terms of code. He said, well, everybody's writing like really great code except for, everyone was making mistakes except for the Dutch. And he said, why aren't the Dutch making any mistakes when they're transmitting these messages? Then they started to recall the Dutch agents to London, and there was always some problem, like that the agent would get really busy, or he would drown, or he would be shot, or something like this, and he never showed up. And Leo Marx realized, you know what, there are no Dutch agents. And it was his theory, and that the Germans had shot all the agents and begun impersonating them. And so what was they had learned, for example, what's called the fist. And the fist is your typing style. When you're typing on a mechanical typewriter, you have one finger that comes down on the T harder than on the S, so that you can be identified. It's your sort of fingerprint of your style. So they had captured these agents, killed them, and impersonated them. The reason that this was interesting and important in that war was that these fake agents said, oh, don't worry about D-Day, the Dutch resistance is really ready for it. In fact, there was no Dutch resistance, so all of these impersonating agents and these complicated codes were kind of sending the wrong message.